Hey, Manny. How
Hey,
you
how's it
doing?
going?
I'm
I'm good.
good.
How are you?
Okay, so welcome everybody to Insight Plug podcast. I'm your host, Destiny Hopt, and today we have our guest, Manny, a student pilot, and we're going to learn about his career. So, Manny, what made you pursue your career as a student pilot?
Well, I've always had interest in aviation for a pretty long time. I just had a curiosity about it, and I decided to go for a discovery flight. And that's like essentially you go to like a flight school, and they take you around and kind of show you what it's like to be in the cockpit and kind of put you in the control sometimes too. So I thought that was really cool, and that kind of lured me into wanting to learn more about it. And I decided to take more classes, and that was like the rest is history.
Okay. So what roadblocks did you have to face when you were starting out?
I think it's this a lot of like my prior lack of knowledge of aviation. I didn't really go into it with a lot of knowledge in like the area, like formal studies. I never studied like engineering, and I think they were anything science related, So it's since high school, so it's been a long time, and kind of the getting into like that kind of specialty of science where you're just dealing with understanding the plane and understanding so many different parts of um, understanding the weather, navigation, things like that. And at first, it all seems very intimidating, and I was intimidated at first for a while. But the more you kind of learn, the more you study it, it all kind of comes together. And that was one of my biggest roadblocks was just kind of getting over the mental over a hurdle of thinking that I can't do it because I don't have any like prior knowledge. When just it's just a matter of studying and how much time and effort you put into it.
Okay. And what is your greatest achievement that you can say that throughout this whole ordeal? What is your greatest achievement?
I would say probably getting my scholarship, which was a year ago. I got the NGPA scholarship, which they award to people, members, and people who are not part of the LGBT community. So if you're just a supporter as well, so it's essentially a really awesome scholarship that they gave to me, and I was honored. It was really crazy because I'd applied and I didn't really think I'd get it, and it was a long, lengthy process of applications. It was like essays and kind of sending in over a resume, things like that. And I got a call a couple of months later saying that I was selected for the full ride private pilot scholarship, and that was just really awesome because it's a very expensive hobby, even to fly. So that was one of my biggest accomplishments was to get that scholarship, and I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Okay. So what does a day in the life look like for a student pilot? Like other than like testing stuff, like when you're actually flying, um, yeah, what does that look like?
A lot of it is preparation. We take a lot of priority to make sure that we're well prepared and we know what the weather is like, where we're going to fly, where we're going to fly to, and making sure that the plane is well prepared itself, that it meets the requirements of what the FAA needs for a plane to be able to fly and for a pilot to be able to fly the plane. So, making sure that we are all covered legally, that we're allowed to fly based on the weather, things look good. We all just want to, that's kind of like the biggest thing, just related to safety. And once we got that out of the way, um, that's like the biggest chunk. And then we pretty much just talk and debrief the flight and getting into the cockpit of actually and going through a checklist. So we make sure that we're aware of what we're doing step by step. And so checklists are really important and a big part of every pilot's um, life, essentially. We're following it from the very beginning of the time that we're pre-flighting to the very end. So a very end of our flight. So it's very important. And, um, that's just also so that we don't rely on memorization. We want to make sure that we're really thorough and we're very safe. So a lot of our time is just spent on that. And while we are flying, even you're focused on checking our checklist while maintaining, a visual cue on what's going on around us. And that's a lot of it. And once we land, it's just going over what we could have done better, going over the good things that we did and things that we improved on. And a lot of the life of a student pilot is just learning and being put in a little bit of uncomfortable situations from time to time, because it's things that we've learned before. It's not new, because um, if you study and if you really get into like studying and preparing for the written test, it's also one of the things that we have to do. Um, Applying that is just what we're essentially doing. We're just really applying the things that we've learned. And that can be difficult, but it's also just a matter of like just being in those uncomfortable situations and growing from that, because every pilot has those weaknesses and weak points. So it's just a matter of like doing it as much as you can and practicing, because that makes any pilot more proficient, and that's what's most important. So just making use of all the time that we're flying, and even when we're not in the air, like talking about what we could do better, or like just conditions around our flight which are interesting. So that's kind of what the average life of a student pilot would be. I think there's a lot of communication with the instructor. That's like huge. So yeah.
You have like a favorite model, a pilot or airplane model?
I have quite a lot, but I certainly like my favorite at this time right now is the Icon A5. It's a seaplane slash. It's pretty much like a seaplane, but it's a very it's kind of like the Tesla the um, of the planes right now, in my opinion. It's very sleek looking. The design, it's very like uh, just modern, and all the technology essentially can take off on water and land in water, and it's like a water plane slash like a typical plane, and this is very cool. I think it's just kind of showing the direction to where a lot of planes will be heading in the future. Will be more towards like meeting needs in different ways, more than just being an average passenger. It's also turning to like the technology is also going towards like plane like seaplanes and electric planes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's one of my favorite planes right now.
Okay. And what's some advice that you would give to any future pilot, a student pilot, or anybody interested in flying any type of plane?
I would say being dedicated is probably like the biggest thing, because or just like just dedication, commitment, because you have to just like I said mentioned, you have to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, and learn. It's about being a very open-minded student, and I think the process of learning and being a pilot also teaches a lot about oneself, and like where how we learn, and like like being a test taker is a very uh, regular part of like this aviation journey in general. Like you have to take a lot of tests throughout your whole aviation career, whether you just want to make it a career or you want to keep it as a hobby. But whichever one it is, it still requires you to be like proficient and being upgraded in your skills, and that requires taking tests. So I would say learning to be good at overcoming that stress and that anxiety before taking a test. And for a lot of people, including myself, like dealing with that test anxiety. And even if you prepared very well, but once we're in that moment of like taking that test, it's like, oh, like all that memory just goes away. So um, being very good at staying focused and studying and being prepared for those tests is a big thing. But also I think like a part of it is just having fun. And my instructor would just I think one of the best things about my instructor would be that he would in the very beginning of a flight, sometimes when I'd be stressed out because if the flights were just too long, there's at a point you kind of like your brain just becomes like tired. It's just
Mm-hmm.
fatigued from all the mental work of flying the plane. And at that point it doesn't become as fun. It's like distressful. You want to be on the ground, and there's this like just get me off this plane already. And at those points, my instructor would take over, and he would kind of just remind me like this is still it's still fun. Think about it like this: you're still thousands of feet above the air, and like that's kind of like a crazy thought for a lot of people, but that's like it's sort of like a thrilling thought too. And in that, I think that is what drives a lot of pilots, student pilots like drive, is that fact that you're doing something that's so it's cool, you know, it's very interesting, and that aspect of like learning about it, it's like it all comes together, and yeah, I would say like just keep making sure that you keep it fun is like an equally important thing, and so yeah, I would say being very serious about it and taking it as you know as it should be taken, but also at the same time just like having fun and not being afraid to like like at points make mistakes. Is also making mistakes is it's it's scary because those mistakes can be really like bad mistakes if
Yeah,
you
if you in the
mess
sky.
up. Yeah, but there's some
Oh.
mistakes that that can be forgivable,
Mhm.
like small ones. But it's all that's one of the reasons why like this is a very this one of those feels that safety is such a big thing, and it's kind of for a lot of people who kind of get into it, they might be annoyed just by how much they hear it, like those kind of regulations and those sort of things. But end of the day, like that's what keeps us all safe and alive. So yeah, I'd say those are some of the things that people who are interested even getting to flying should probably know. Just studying is important. Like sometimes people just think it's like you're just like flying the plane and there's some autopilot that you just press, and it's definitely not like that. There's a lot of when you're learning to fly, these trainer planes are designed for you to be pretty much manually in control for most of the time. There's no autopilots in them, and um, that's kind of like the thrill of it. Like I mentioned, it's really cool, but at the same time, it's uh, taking it as like there's a lot to learn, and planes only get more and more complicated from these types of planes. So just knowing the fundamentals, that itself is like the bare basics of what you need to know to be able to get and progress as a pilot.
What are some beautiful places you flew over? Because I can imagine flying over. You flew over the states or other countries, right?
I've never flown to other countries. I've
Okay,
never
so just the
flown.
states.
I've only flown in my state of California. Yeah.
That's fine. Okay, so
And
what is like the beautiful sights you've seen aesthetically?
oh yeah, there's tons. There's tons. There's like beaches and flying over pretty awesome mountains. We have Big Bear here, so like it's like a snowy mountain. It gets pretty snowy during winter, and it's just beautiful to like fly over them and like different weather and like different times of the year, because during winter you'll find like these like really glacier mountains in some areas of like upper Northern California,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really cool. And if you go to summertime, if you like fly over even like the desert, you just see how barren, like how it's a completely different climate. So it's just like you're kind of exploring
Right.
when you're up there, and just it's really cool. I think that aspect of it. So
It's like the
I've
bird.
flown over some pretty cool areas.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
bird's
yeah,
eye view of everything. Yeah.
right, right.
So what is the greatest moment you've experienced other than that, other than seeing the beautiful sight? What are other great moments that you have experienced flying?
I would say it would be probably to like get over those um, roadblocks and like get those accomplishments, those little accomplishments along the way, is was really awesome. Like the first landing that you make, the first takeoff, those sort of little like milestones, which kind of look back on and think like, oh wow, like I was at that stage where I was still like afraid to make, like landing, and it's like you kind of like look back and it's just really pretty amazing to see that journey. And every pilot has that where they had something that they were like working towards or just thinking that they couldn't get through because it was just too difficult in some way or some form, and then they get past it, and it's like that. It's like a really awesome feeling. It's a lot of pride, and yeah, I think that those like accomplishments make it totally worth it of the pain that can sometimes go into the whole journey of being a pilot, student pilot.
Okay. And so where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your career and everything or life or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. My Instagram actually is M Thackeray, MTHACKERAY 27, and that's pretty much like where I'm the most social. And yeah, that's pretty much where, and also LinkedIn. So Mani, Mani Thackeray, Thackeray. So those two places where you'll be able to find me.
Okay. What do you see yourself doing in 5 years?
I definitely want to stay. I want to just probably stay in the realm of a private pilot. Maybe just get a couple more licenses along the way, but just kind of not really delving into the commercial world of aviation just yet. I want to just get different, like, I want to get a seaplane license. I'd love to get a glider license, kind of like in different areas and learning different planes in the next 5 years, hopefully, and getting myself more familiar with it because I still have like a long way to go. And even just looking back, you see the journey, but you still see there's like a long road ahead, and it's exciting. But I think like just attaining those licenses, it's something I really look forward to doing and staying more proficient and just learning more. I think also just connecting with more pilots in the future would be really awesome too. So that hopefully be me in the next 5 years.
Okay. And what do you want people to remember you by or remember you of? Yeah, when they think of you, what you want people to say? If I'm wording that right.
That's a good question. Yeah, uh, I think as someone who was really passionate about what they did. I think I've always tried to like see things that I do as an equal bit of fun, but also some amount of passion to it because you need to be a little crazy about something if you're going to want to do it or be dedicated to it. Like you want to kind of have a little bit of an obsession with it. So I think that's kind of like my life my life philosophy of how I've gone about doing things. And that's pretty much how I'd want to be hopefully remembered by, just someone who does things in the way that they see fit.
Okay. Can anybody be a pilot, or do you think there needs to be a certain type of person, or can you grow into it? Like somebody who's afraid of heights, they probably wouldn't be the best candidate, but you could come overcome that fear. So what do you think would make a really great pilot or yeah, pilot?
Yeah. Um, so actually, I think that's a pretty good question because there's some, well, like, I mean, excluding things like medical conditions that just immediately eliminate people from being pilots, unfortunately. But I think there are some things that some people like. I don't want to say that no one can be a pilot. There's some behavioral traits that make it difficult for some people to take it as seriously as it should be taken. Because one of the things that we do learn is behavioral, like our own, um, like general personality behaviors. Like if you're feeling impulsive, what we should go about, what's a anecdote for that, like to kind of pause before we take any action. And if you're feeling like egotistical, if you're feeling like like how do I put this, like overconfident, that's also a one of those things that we learned is a hazardous
Hmm.
behavior because that is affecting us as pilots and that could affect our decisions and that could also affect the way that we communicate with our co-pilots. And it has a lot to do with like that's when I mentioned earlier about how it teaches you about yourself.
Hmm.
That's what I meant, is also like when you actually learn about like, oh, being egotistical, having overconfidence, when you're put in the situations of being up in the air and making those sort of decisions as to like, should we deviate, should we go to a different spot, or even in like an emergency situation, for example. And those sort of behaviors can really come out in some people where they can be really bossy, they don't know how to deal with people calmly. And there's some people I think that in those areas just need more work because having a calm demeanor and being a very thoughtful person in general, I think is or just conscientious person, I think is important when you're flying. And for some people, it might be a little harder for them to be as in that zone. And it also takes training. That's another thing. I think it equally takes training when you're up there to kind of put yourself in that zone and really get into what's going on and being conscientious. So I think it's equal part to like if you're one of those like dangers, if you're just someone who's very like narcissistic and has a hard time getting along with people, then it's just one of those it's almost like one of those things that may not be very well suited. Like they might not just find happiness in that, because people in those fields who are really passionate about aviation are generally people that like to also like spread love about it and like communicate and are generally pretty open about it. But there's also just things that might hold people off, like behavior wise and stuff. But I think generally a lot of people can be pilots. Like it's just about how much effort and willingness you are to change any behaviors you have to, because people can change, and it doesn't matter how much you're willing to do that to meet your goal. So it's totally possible, in my opinion. It's just you know it's not like, it's like the saying that everyone be an amazing driver. It's like, it's like everyone can be, but not everyone is. So
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
So you did mention how the planes, you don't really fully control them. They're like, I guess a computerized, like aviation. That means like they're controlled or something like that. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I mentioned that the more complicated planes, like not the ones that we fly, but as you kind of get up there, like like the ones that airline pilots fly, Boeings and Airbuses, those are more computerized, and there's much more like autopilot involvement in just flights. But there's still, like, it comes back to the fundamentals of those pilots having that knowledge of even back to when they were private pilots, how to actually fly. So in the situation that autopilot fails, there's some failure in the actual computer, they know how to take control, and that's one thing that they're trained to do. They have to do that. So
Well,
like that's
I asked that question because I wonder, are gamers who play a lot of um flying games, like people who might be into like army type games like Call of Duty or Guitar players playing Guitar Hero, would a person who is always playing video games, like a pilot video game, would they be a good candidate to be a pilot, or is that two different things?
I would say for the most part they're two different things.
Okay.
Like it's different to be comfortable in your room and just like moving your finger around a keyboard and kind of moving a plane that way. And while there are some similarities
Yeah, they
to
got some simulation
the,
machines where
the
you can actually build
simulations,
it. Yeah, in your room,
yeah,
and that's the ones I mean. Not like the ones that you play on the PCs.
okay,
I mean, I've seen real big machines where they have the analog, and you get to talk to a person, a sim person in the game.
gotcha,
And
yes.
I wonder if somebody says, "Oh, I want to be a student pilot," and they put that on their
Hmm.
resume or whatever. Is that a go, or is that two
Yeah.
different things?
Those sort of simulators, those more advanced ones, are definitely more suitable to like learn on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those are like, I mean, even for a student pilot, they'll often just, if they're having some difficulty with some area, they'll just hop on the simulator and try to work on that area on the simulator. So it can definitely come in very useful, but it doesn't replace instruction like in actual flying. And that's the reason why we have that requirement for at least 40 hours of actual flight time. Now, to actually, like, what you're saying is, if you're into that stuff and if you think that that replicates, like, would that be the actual life of a student pilot? In some ways there could be some similarities in like the controls, and especially like the stick and rudder control, what we call it, is this natural, like, an idea of like how to move the plane and how to appropriately move it. So it's more, I think, if you practice on a simulator more, it comes more naturally to someone who does more of that practice. So yeah, I would say there's some great benefits of using simulator time, but not being overly dependent on it.
Okay. Well, I had a great conversation, learned a lot, and I
Hmm.
thank you for coming on the show, Manny. And I hope to see you soon, being an awesome pilot after you finish your student pilot career. And thank you for coming on the show. All right,
All
see you
right,
later.
thank you, Destiny. All right, talk to you later.
Talk to
Bye.
you later. Bye.